Good afternoon, everyone. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm about to interview a successful entrepreneur. His name is Chris Widener. So stay tuned. And go and get your pen and your pad right now and write down these business notes that Chris is going to reveal to each and every one of you. And remember, I love each and every one of you.
Hey there.
Hey, Chris, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great, and it's getting better each and every single day.
Good, good.
Hey, you're looking good. Where you tuning in from?
Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Ah, all right.
And
Beautiful.
where are you again?
Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Ah, Philadelphia. That's right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, I appreciate you coming on my platform. And
absolutely. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you. And I told a great friend of mine about you. And he's in the California area. And he specializes in the private equity industry. He's done a lot of work with Jay Abraham and Tony Robbins.
Oh, yeah.
And when I told him about you, he went to your website and he was very impressed.
Oh,
What
cool.
you're doing in the personal development space. So he wanted to see if we can actually, do a conference call and see how we can create value for one another.
Yeah, that'd be great. Let me know.
All right, I'll let you know. All righty, you ready to rock and roll?
Yeah, format's just question and answer. You lead the way, and then how long are we looking at?
Right, 45 to an hour.
Okay, I have a call coming in top of the hour, so if we could do like maybe 50 would be great.
Oh, that'll be that's absolutely perfect.
Perfect. Sounds good. I'm ready when you are.
All righty. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Arthur Robinson Jr. I'm the creator and host of the Powerful Interviews podcast. And today I have another special interview for each and every one of you. Today I have a wonderful person on the show, and he's a great friend of mine. His name is Chris Widener. For those that don't know Chris, let me explain to each and every one of you about this incredible, phenomenal man. Chris Widener is a professional speaker. He is an author. And I love the title of one of his books, which is called The Art of Influence. He has a publishing company, and he also has a speakers academy where he actually teaches entrepreneurs and business owners on how they can effectively speak on stage. And that is an awesome, impressive resume. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome the one, the only, the powerful Chris Widener to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I'd like to thank you, Chris, for taking time out of your busy schedule to educate me and the audience worldwide about your phenomenal book, The Art of Influence. And we're definitely going to talk about the 12 pillars of success. I gladly appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to talk about whatever will help your audience the most.
To everyone that is listening and watching right now, I highly recommend go and get your pen and your pad right now. My great friend, Chris Widener, is going to break down layman's terms about the 12 pillars of success. And we're going to talk about the art of influence. Is that correct, Chris?
Yeah, we can talk about either one of those books. We can talk about anything else you want to talk about. I always tell people I'm an open book. I can talk about anything you want to talk about, as long as it's, success or motivation or personal development. And I've been in this business since 1988. And I had some great mentors. I had a TV show with Zig Ziglar, and then I spent the last 7 years of Jim Rohn's life working with him. And for people who don't know Jim is the guy who gave Tony Robbins his first job. So when Tony was 17 years old, he went to work with Jim Rohn and selling Jim Rohn seminars. He was selling Jim Rohn seminars before he sold Tony Robbins seminars. So,
wow. Now, what I'd like to know, and can you explain to the audience in layman's terms, who is the phenomenal Chris Widener? How long have you been in your powerful industry, and what is your expertise?
Well, I had a really rough upbringing. My dad died when I was 4. I lived in 28 homes. I went to 11 different schools. I started drugs in the 5th, 6th grade. I made most of my money growing up betting the horses at Long Acres Horse Track. It doesn't exist anymore outside of Seattle, but But I made my money doing that. I was also a ball boy for the Seattle Supersonics for 7 years, from the time I was 11 years old till the time I was 18. And so probably one of the things that saved my life was having an extraordinary experience like that. We actually won a world championship when I was working there, summer of 1979. So that was a lot of fun. We beat the Washington Bullets after losing to them in 7 games the year before. And then I kind of drifted through high school. I graduated 149th out of 172 kids. Zig Ziglar always used to say he was in the half of the class that made the top half possible. Well, I was in the 10th of a class that made the top 90% possible. And but I got my life turned around. I decided I really wanted to make something in my life. I started learning personal development. I rekindled a relationship with God, which pointed me in the right direction. And I got into the speaking business pretty early, 1988, right after I graduated from college, because people saw this transformation from this kid who was a drug addicted, guy gambling on the horses and barely staying in school, to now having his life under control and building a business. I built a publishing company. We used to sell 50 to 75,000 boxes of audio programs a month through Costco and Sam's Club. And in the early 2000s, I caught 3 really lucky breaks in about 4 years. I got asked to work with a guy named John Maxwell, who's a big leadership guru, and I wrote his nationally syndicated column for him. And then after that, Jim Rohn called me and asked me if I would work with him. I wrote his last book, 12 Pillars. And then Zig Ziglar invited me to come and co-host his television show called True Performance, which you can still find on YouTube. And that's a lot of fun to go and look at myself from 20 years ago and see how young I was and how many wrinkles I didn't have on my face and how skinny I was. But anyway, that's sort of the brief overview of the trajectory of my life. But it's been a lot of fun. The book, Art of Influence, I've probably done 1,000 speeches on it all over the world. It's taken me to Russia, China, Germany, Spain, Australia, just all over the place. Singapore, 46 of the 50 United States. There's a few up in the Northeast I haven't gotten to yet, but it's been a great life.
You also spoke in Egypt,
a lot of fun.
correct?
Huh?
You also spoke in Egypt, correct?
Yeah, I spoke in Egypt actually twice. In fact, I believe I'm the only person to ever speak in Egypt in the morning and Los Angeles at night. Wow. On the same day. Now, technically, it was like 36 hours because when you come back, you pick up all those hours coming back. But it was like 8 a.m. in Cairo, Egypt, and then like 8 p.m. at night in Los Angeles at Disneyland. Somebody was putting on a conference at Disneyland. But yeah, Egypt was fascinating, really fascinating to go to a culture that's just so different from ours. And it was a lot of fun.
Now, you also co-authored with Jim Rohn the 1-year success plan. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that's what the book 12 Pillars is based off of. So in the 1-year success plan, which is still available today, every month is a different pillar. And then the book was sort of a way to synopsize the program and give people kind of a taste of it, at which point they could say, you know what, I want to study this more in depth. And then they can sign up for the 1-year program.
Now, Chris, you speak all over the world. And when you speak, the audience listens. Now, I know entrepreneurs and business owners, they are actually thinking about getting into the professional speaking industry. And I always tell them, you're not just, a speaker, you are a marketer who is marketing your speaking services. Now, for the entrepreneurs and business owners, when they actually get the opportunity to speak up on a small stage or a big stage, they deliver their message and they have the audience rush to the back of the room and rush the product table. Should entrepreneurs and business owners create a low-tier product or a high-tier product? Or should they just create a low-tier product and a mid-tier product and a high-tier product? So that way they won't get an audience to do any type of cafeteria selling. How do you feel about that?
I think that you should have something for everybody, right? But what you want to do is you want to price it so that it makes the most sense to buy the highest package. And we see this all the time. You can get, I was reading a book actually on pricing, and I think it was The Economist magazine. You could get the newspaper for $20 a year, or you could get the You could get the newspaper or the electronic version. No, the electronic version for $15 a year, the print version for $20 a year, or for $25 a year, you get both. And they found out that if you price it that way, almost everybody takes the highest tier because it's only $10 a year. And now you get both. You can read it, or you can look at it online, or whatever. But the one thing that I would say about entrepreneurs thinking about getting into speaking is this: speaking is not a business, it's a strategy. And so you should not look at speaking as being your business. And there are some people for whom it's been a lifelong business, but the people who make the most money view speaking as a strategy, not the actual business. I know a friend of mine who she actually will go and speak for free. So she doesn't get paid to speak for free, but she chooses the audience correctly, and she has a high-end package. She says, I'll go speak for free. Everybody else is, organization will say, hey, will you come and speak? And they ask 3 people. And one guy says, I'll do it for 5,000. The other guy says, I'll do it for 10,000. She says, I'll do it for free. Or she actually has said, you know what, I'll make your deal. I'll pay you to come and speak. And I'll pay you to be on your stage. I'll pay you 10,000 because she knows that if she does it right in the right audience, she knows what audience it is. She says, I'll walk out with $250,000 that night. And the other guys were wanting to get paid 10. I'll pay them 10 and walk out with 250,000 for a net of 240. So speaking is a strategy to promote your business. I think real estate agents should write a book and speak. I think insurance agents should write a book and speak. I think dentists and doctors, like anybody can write a book and start getting out there speaking, even if it's at the local Rotary Club. Maybe you're never going to be on a big giant stage and share it with, Tony Robbins or Les Brown or people like that. But, you can still use it to really build a great business.
Wow. Now, the professional speaking industry, that's a $780 billion industry. It's huge right now. Yep. Now, from your own experience, when the pandemic actually went into effect around in 2020, did it affect your public speaking fees, or would you still be able to, cut through the BS, so to speak, in regards to still delivering your message to your particular audience?
Well, it didn't cut my fees, but it cut how many people even were hiring anybody. I mean, I lost hundreds of thousands of dollars overnight because people just said, yeah, we can't do our conference anymore. It's all shut down. So, but then I ended up, people started doing virtual seminars, and, everybody had to figure out what they were going to price for virtual seminars. And I ended up doing one for 7,000 network marketers in Tehran, Iran. And that was pretty interesting. They saw me up on the screen, and then they had their computers so I could see the audience, and we were on Skype or Zoom or something. And so that was a lot of fun. But, you got to figure out, we all had to pivot. We all had to figure out some things. I wrote another book over COVID. Ended up being my 22nd book called Lasting Impact. And then I expanded my coaching business. So I started doing a lot of coaching for people. I brought on more clients than I typically would have had because I wasn't traveling or doing any speaking.
Wow. Yes. A lot of entrepreneurs and active business owners, they just start getting creative, but they just start doing online virtual events.
Yeah.
And the owners of Zoom, they equity went through the roof.
Oh, yeah.
Close to $1 billion last year, and it's still actually constantly growing.
Yeah.
So, a lot of people just got innovative and creative and say, you know what, okay, I can't, do my live seminars because of the pandemic and the shutdowns, but I can also still deliver value, to my online community by doing virtual live events. So that was real big.
Yeah, for sure.
Chris, let's have a conversation about money. Now, I know money is not value. Money is just a facilitator to do transactions. Can you explain to the audience, how would you define money?
Well, I view money as a tool. Obviously money is, it started out, and I don't know how many of your folks know what the original money was, but the original money was salt. People traded salt. And it was the first thing that people could pay for other goods. They would say, here's some salt, and then people would trade, even, in the olden days, poor farmers would pay their doctor with a chicken or, things like that. So it's an exchange of value. money is really just something that allows us to not have to carry gold and chickens and salt around. It establishes a perceived value. Now, the problem is when Nixon took us off the gold exchange, now all of a sudden it wasn't backed by anything. And in fact, I have a friend who's in the money business, and he says he always likes to hold up a bill, and he says, you see these three words here, there's only one of them that's actually true. It is neither federal nor is there a reserve. It's simply a note. And really, it's not backed by gold anymore. It's not backed by any value. It's really only backed by the promise of the American government, which is why people are getting into crypto, and people like to buy gold and silver because it's something tangible that actually has a value to it. And so money's an interesting thing. There's a great book, I think it's called The History of Money, and really a fascinating book to see how money how it grows, and I'm kind of good at the macroeconomics, but when you get down to the micro, like, how it actually works and why inflation happens and all those kinds of things, I don't really understand all the little details. I understand the supply and demand, and, we continue to print money, and the more money you print, the less each dollar's worth. The illustration I always use is if you're playing Monopoly, and somebody lands on one of your properties and it's $500 for rent, and they only have $400, and they reach into the bank and pull out $400 more dollars. Well, they now have $800 to pay your $500, but your $500 you're not going to charge them $500 anymore because they just took money out of the bank. You're now going to bump it to $700 or $800. And that's exactly what happens when the federal government prints money. Now all of a sudden there's more money in the system, and now prices go up. It's about as easy as possible because people can raise their monies. When you allow credit and debt, it's one of the things that's driven up easy credit is what drove up housing prices. It's what has grown college and university prices. College and university used to be really affordable. And the more they made student loans available, the more colleges went, okay, now these people have more money, let's raise our prices. So instead of being $10,000 a year, now it's $20,000 a year, and the parents are going into debt and the students are going into debt. And frankly, one of the biggest bubbles that's probably going to hit, over $1 trillion owed just for colleges and universities. So the student loan debt is huge. So it's something we really need to take a look at, but at its simplest form, it's just an exchange, the ability to exchange value for something else.
Yes, absolutely. And I agree with you. I know former President Donald Trump, he invested a lot of money in the HBCUs.
Absolutely. Yeah, 500 million, I think he did.
Absolutely. So would you say that money is the byproduct of the value that you uncover?
Yeah, Jim Rohn always used to say, if you want to make more money, create more value, right? So it's funny, you have some speakers, they charge $5,000 for a speech, and you have other people who charge $100,000 a speech. So why would somebody get $100,000 for a speech, which is what Zig Ziglar used to get? Well, there's a couple reasons. Number one, maybe the people who are hiring him just really highly esteem him, and they love him, and they just want to meet him and bring him in, and they've got plenty of money. So heck, let's give him 100,000. But the real reason you pay a speaker a lot of money is because they put, as the old saying goes, butts in seats, And so let's say your tickets are $100 each, or let's say they're $1,000 each. The guy who you're paying $5,000, he might not be able to even sell 5 tickets for you. But the guy who you start promoting that you have the $100,000 guy coming, and he sells more than 1,000 tickets for, 100 tickets for you. So he is much more value at $100,000 than the guy who's charging $5,000, because this guy can't sell $5,000 worth of tickets, and this guy might sell $200,000 worth of tickets. I know sometimes speakers, very famous speakers, will get paid $200,000 or $300,000 for an appearance. But what happens is more people come to the conference, and then they do things like you can buy a special lunch with the person, or you can get your picture taken if you pay a fee. And so that's how the person will make more money, is by charging for, some other activities with that speaker. So it ends up, it might be a real value to pay somebody $300,000 for an appearance.
Wow. Now, with your outside the box mindset. Is your public speaking fee at that range?
It's at 30. I charge 30. If somebody calls me up, if Microsoft or somebody calls me up and they say, hey, we want you to come and speak, it's 30,000. But again, going back to speaking as a strategy, the most money I ever made in one day at a speaking engagement, I didn't charge them a fee and I paid my own way there. I paid all my expenses. It was a network marketing company. It was in Australia. It was in Brisbane, Australia. And so, by the time I paid an airline ticket and all that stuff and took the time to go off, I probably had an investment of $10,000 to go down there.
Mm-hmm.
I gave one 45-minute speech and sold $140,000 worth of product. And so, after you take out cost of goods or whatever, I probably cleared 100. So the most money I ever made in one day at a speech, I didn't even get paid for it. So again, you kind of have to, or I remember early on in the early days, they wanted me to come and give a speech. And I think I was charging $4,500 or $6,000 at the time. This was 25 years ago, something like that. And they wanted me to come for free. Well, I said, okay, who's the audience? And the audience was 200 CEOs. And so I did it. And I booked over $70,000 worth of speeches that day from CEOs who walked up, said, I want to bring you to my company. Here's my card, call me. And then I booked it out. And over the course of the next 18 months or so, I made about $70,000 by speaking for free. So, but if Microsoft calls and they say, hey, I just want you to come and speak, you can't sell a book, you can't sell audio programs, you can't sell coaching programs, we just want you to give a speech, it's 30,000. That's kind of the rack rate.
Wow. Yes, I know when it comes to speakers, the right audience has to be tailor-made for the speakers.
Yeah.
So that was very creative, and you actually did some critical thinking of, wait a minute, you're talking about, high-power CEOs. Well, that was a great opportunity for you to capitalize on. So you pretty much ain't had to charge a public speaking fee because you got so much business when you deliver that value at that particular venue.
Yeah. I think I got 12 speeches out of that room, out of 200 CEOs at 6,000 a piece. So I think it was like $72,000 added to my bottom line. Now I could have said, I'm sorry, you have to pay me my $6,000, at which point they'd have said, yeah, we're not interested. We don't have the budget for it. Well, I would have not gotten the 6 and I would have not gotten the 72. So sometimes you have to realize, I have a saying, I always say, don't trip over nickels, get into dollars. Don't trip over nickels, get into dollars. Sometimes people, they trip over nickels and they get caught up on the small amount and they don't realize the bigger amount that comes.
Absolutely. I agree with you. Now, for the event coordinators or the event planners that are actually in charge of that event, the speaker has to make the event coordinator or the event planner look good in regards to the whole entire event, correct? Because if you make them look good, then they're going to want to do, repeated business with you.
That's my number one job. And I tell people, I'll tell you some of what I tell meeting planners. I always say this, look, I understand that you're taking a risk anytime you hire a speaker, because this whole event is on your reputation. And you bring in a speaker and that speaker's either going to make you look good or that speaker's going to make you look bad. And I know that you want to look good. And I also will talk with the CEO, if there's a CEO that wants to talk, and I'll ask, what's the message that I can convey to your audience so that it will support the message that you're giving them, or that the theme of the event, or those kinds of things. The other thing is I tell people all the time, meeting planners, I will be the easiest person you've ever worked with. I will be the easiest speaker you've ever worked with. I don't have contract writers, I don't need a pile of M&Ms with the brown ones taken out. I don't need my ham and cheese sandwiches cut up into star shapes. I don't need my water at 68 degrees. I don't need any of that. I go to work when somebody hires me, and I want to do my best and make them look as good as possible. And I one of my favorite things is afterwards when somebody comes and says, you know what, you really were the easiest speaker I've ever worked with. And I appreciate that, because I know they've got a tough job. I mean, my job is to show up and speak. Their job is everything from meals to seating to video to speakers to luncheons to breakout sessions. They don't need to worry about me. I make sure that I'm easy. And I actually know of a woman who shall remain nameless. She is a very, very successful woman who is a speaker, and she commands a great fee. And I have had at least 3 speakers bureaus tell me that they will never book her again. And she's got a great story, and she's a great speaker. But 3 separate bureaus have told me, oh, we will never book her again. And I'm like, well, why? By the time the third one, I knew why, because the first 2 had told me why. She is so extraordinarily difficult to work with once she gets to the event that the meeting planners hate her. And the meeting planners call up the bureau, and they're like, why in the world did you send this person to us? Yeah, she was great on stage, but she was a pain in the neck the whole rest of the time. And you don't want to be that person.
Yeah, it's the attitude.
It is. Yeah.
You have to adopt, have an abundance mindset, especially when people are having confidence in you and your brand, and they want to hire you to speak. But you had to be easy to work with, because you only get one time to make a great impression.
Well, and it's a humble and a grateful attitude too. And I'll tell you why. I get paid $30,000 to talk for an hour. There are people who haul bricks around in wheelbarrows for a year and don't make $30,000. So I am humbled by the fact, but I'm also grateful for that fact that I don't have to haul bricks around and or stand on the street and hold a sign in the freezing cold for cars to come and go. So, a lot of people, they start to believe their own press, and they believe that they're better than others and they're smarter than others and they deserve to be treated better. Don't look me in the eyes, all this kind of baloney that people do. And it's just not my attitude. And, my old saying, I'm a Christian, my old saying that I always say is, at the foot of the cross, we are all exactly the same. I don't care if you're a king or you're a pauper, we're all exactly the same at the foot of the cross. So I don't treat people better because they're richer than me. I don't treat people worse because they're poorer than me. I don't treat people better because they're more famous than me. I don't treat people worse because they're not as famous as me, because we're all human beings. And I really believe that, and I try to live that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Execution is worship, and gratitude is also worship as well.
Absolutely.
So, you treat people the way you like to be treated. And I love providing hope to people, and hope stands for helping other people excel.
Oh, I like that. I've never heard that before. I like that.
Absolutely. Chris, I appreciate you coming on my show today, because the whole premise of my show is to educate entrepreneurs and business owners that they can live the life that they truly desire, but they have to be open to these important principles. So I don't like what I see what's on the news, so I create my own news. Chris, let's have a conversation about what it truly takes to be an entrepreneur. Now, the word entrepreneur means entreprendre, and it was a Latin word. It was invented in the 15th century in France. And a gentleman by the name of John Baptist, he invented the word, and over 300 years later, that word still exists, which is entrepreneur. So entre means between, and ponder means to take. So it means to take lower productivity and increase it to higher productivity. Can you explain to the audience, how are you increasing your productivity in your current businesses?
Yeah, I think the key to being an entrepreneur is to make a decision. Everybody has to make that first decision. I think we all, maybe somebody has been an entrepreneur all their life, starting with a lemonade stand, but most of us go to work for somebody else. I don't know what your first job was, but my first job was, as I mentioned before, I was a ball boy for the Seattle Supersonics. I got paid $5 a game for 5 hours. I was 2 hours before the game, 2 hours for the game, and an hour after the game. $5 a game. So $1 an hour I made for my first job. And then I was a dishwasher. And then I was in college, I was a security guard. And, we all have those jobs. But ultimately, I became an entrepreneur, and I made the decision that I didn't want to work for somebody else. I wanted to control my own destiny. And there are pros and cons to that. The pro to working for somebody else is security. I know that if I show up for 40 hours, I'm going to get X amount of dollars handed to me. And I know that I'm going to get X amount of vacation every year. Usually not as much money as I want, and usually not as much vacation as I want. So what you do is you trade security for opportunity. And that's what being an opportunity is. You're trading security for opportunity. And some people are not good entrepreneurs because they don't have the discipline. They're too afraid. There's just some things that keep them from doing it. They're unwilling to make the decision. They're unwilling to let go of the job. They dabble in network marketing or things like that, but they won't necessarily go and make the jump to become for the opportunity because they want the security. Now, the beauty of being an entrepreneur is you can get rich. You can have total control over your time and your schedule. You can make as much or as little money as you want to. You can work as much or as little as you want to. You can go to vacations whenever you want to. And that's what I've always been. I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, and I've enjoyed it, once I got, out of college and such. And I've always enjoyed it. And I think the key is, as Jim Rohn always says, create more value. The old saying is create a better mousetrap, right? If you can create something that's better, people will use it. Google's a great example. Google was not the first search engine. Do you remember some of those search engines? I don't know how old you are, but I can remember some of those. For Ask Jeeves. Do you remember Ask Jeeves? There was a website called Ask Jeeves. There was one called Alta Vista. There was one called InfoSeek. There was all these websites, and then, and they were pretty good. But then along came Google, bam. And all of a sudden, there you go. There's different browsers. Internet Explorer used to dominate the browser business, and then Chrome came along, and now Chrome has almost all of the business. Even people who are on Apple, who instead of using Safari, they use Chrome. People on Microsoft, instead of using Internet Explorer, they use Chrome. And it's all about making something better, and usually at a cheaper price. Although Apple made a better phone, and because of it, they charged more for it, and people are willing to pay a lot more money. It costs a lot more money to get an iPhone than it does an Android phone. But the people who own Apples, they like it, they enjoy it, they like the user interface and those kinds of things. And so, whether you're starting a lawn mowing business, or you're starting a dry cleaners, or you're starting a technology company, what are you going to do better? How are you going to be better? What's your position in the marketplace? One of the things I talk about all the time with entrepreneurs, it's really actually the very first thing you need to talk about, is what is your position in the marketplace? And you need to find something. You either need to be the best, the fastest, the cheapest, whatever. And I'll give you an example I always use: plumbers. Let's talk about plumbers for a minute. Okay, let's say that it's let's say that you notice there's a big leak in your kitchen. There's water coming all over, and you don't have much money. If you don't have much money and you see a leak in your kitchen, you go to the internet and you search for a specific term. What does a poor person search when they need a plumber? They search for cheap plumbers. That's what they do, cheap plumbers. Now, let's say a rich person sees a whole bunch of water on their kitchen floor. They go to the internet and they search for best plumbers, because money's not an opportunity. And those two plumbing companies are going to be different. One is going to be known as the cheap plumber. One is going to be known as the best plumber. Now, let's say that you're rich or you're poor, and it's 2 a.m. and you get up to go to the bathroom, and all of a sudden you see a bunch of water pouring out of your ceiling. You don't search for cheap plumbers. You don't search for best plumbers. You search for one of two terms: emergency plumbers or 24-hour plumbers. And those guys, they make the most money. The emergency 24-hour plumbers, they make the most money. Best plumbers make the second amount of money. Cheap plumbers make the third amount of money. But there's people who are cheap plumbers who make a fortune because they completely have the position in that marketplace. Of all the cheap plumbers, Joe's Plumbing is the best plumbing, right? For the cheap plumbers. And then you might have XYZ Plumbing is the best plumber. I mean, they got the best customer service, and they got the most timely service plans, and all these. You got to pay a little bit more, but it's worth it for people. And then you have the people who say, I'm willing to get up at 2 a.m. and come fix your pipe, but you're going to pay me extra for that. And then each one of those is a position.
Mhm.
And it's important for people to understand their position in the marketplace.
Mm. You're absolutely right. When you mentioned about the iPhone, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, they took the Apple brand to a whole nother level. And before Steve Jobs passed away, he had $119 billion in the bank, cash liquid, because they took the Apple brand to a whole nother level. You remember back in the day, the Blackberries?
The BlackBerry, yeah,
And then
yeah,
before that, that was called the Palm Pilots.
yep,
Yeah, absolutely. So
yeah.
they basically just, took over the whole cell phone tower industry. And when you was actually talking about, technology, but technology is constantly evolving.
Yep. And frankly, Microsoft is still one of the biggest companies in the world, primarily because they sell to businesses and business enterprise work. But the fact is Microsoft should have owned the music player business,
Mm,
but Bill Gates said, "Yeah, I don't want to get into it." There's a guy named Rob Glazer, and he's one of the owners of the Seattle Mariners now. I grew up in Seattle, so I know all these stories. And Rob worked for Bill, and he said, "We need to get into streaming music." And Bill said, "I don't see it." So he said,
mm,
"Bye, I'm out of here." And he started a company called Real Networks. And it was the first online streaming. It was called the Real Player. And he made a fortune. He now owns part of a major league sports team. Microsoft should have owned the phone business. They should have owned all sorts of businesses, but they didn't because they're not very ingenuitive. They don't know how to invent. They tend to buy things once they've already been invented rather than invent them themselves. But a lot of those big companies do. Amazon does. And I have a friend who worked for Amazon. He walked into Bezos and he said, "We need to develop this." And he said, "I just don't see it." He goes, "No, I'm telling you, we really need to develop this." And Jeff goes, "I don't think so." He goes, "All right, I quit." And Jeff said, "Huh? You quit? What are you talking about?" And he goes, "You're going to buy this from me for 30 million 3 years from now." And he did. He quit. He went and
mm,
built it because he knew that it was needed, and
mm,
Jeff just bought it from him. So there's a lot of people like that, and a lot of companies end up doing that. Facebook bought Instagram, and they buy their competitors is what they do.
Absolutely, absolutely. Jeff Bezos, last year, he generated billions of dollars, but he had to pay zero in
Yeah,
taxes.
yeah.
And that is the benefit of, taking advantage of the Internal Revenue Tax Code, which they're putting more money in your bank account. And
Which goes to the fact that, and I'm not an accountant, I'm not a lawyer, but everybody needs to understand the secrets of the rich. And
mhm,
the number one secret of the rich is using an entity. You need to
mhm,
have an LLC or an S corp or whatever. I'm not giving you advice. Go talk to your accountant or your attorney. But this is what happens. You can take all of these expenses and run them through your business, and what's left over gets passed down to you. And this is what happens. All the wealthy, they do it. They use things like trusts, so they can put the money in the trust, and now there's no tax on it. But that trust can be set up to pay them a certain amount of money every year. And or trusts are not taxed when you die. So if you have $1 billion and you die, 500 to 600 of it is going to go to you, to Uncle Sam. You put that $1 billion in a trust, and you get to live off of it while you're alive. And maybe that trust owns your giant mansion, and it owns your car, and it owns your whatever, your boat, and you get to use it. But then when you die, that $1 billion, it's still in the trust, but now your kids can start to live off of the trust. That's why the Rockefellers, the Kennedys, all these giant fortunes that were built in the 1800s and the 1900s, they still have thousands. Some of these families have thousands of descendants who are living off of the wealth because it's just continued to grow, and it's set up to give portion of it to the people who are the descendants, and the rest of it just keeps on growing. And the descendants aren't
absolutely,
outspending they're not outspending the growth of the trust.
absolutely. Their heirs are capitalizing on what their ancestors or grandfathers or grandmothers has created.
Yep.
And that's absolutely incredible. I mean, I know people that stuck with Bill Gates early in his career. You have his janitors now that are actually millionaires.
I knew a guy in ministry back in the 90s, and his wife was like the 42nd person hired, and she was a secretary. And
Mhm,
when her stock was worth like $20 million, she quit. And they
mhm,
stuck it into a trust, and he and his wife did ministry, and they lived off of, anywhere between $1 million and $2 million a year that the interest threw off. They put it into a mutual fund, 10% of 20 million, $2 million bucks. And that's what they lived off of. And they traveled and they did ministry. So yeah, there's a lot of people who've gotten very, very wealthy through some of these structures, even structures that other people created.
Absolutely. And you have wealthy entrepreneurs. They actually are, building and buying existing businesses, just through the insurance company, where, borrowing, money off of their whole life insurance. You can't borrow.
What do they call that? Bank on yourself. I don't know a lot about bank on yourself, but that's what you're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, bank on yourself.
Yeah. Chris, now I know a couple of years ago, Google bought YouTube for $1.6 billion. So video is hot right now. Can you explain to the audience the power of using video, and should entrepreneurs and business owners use video to expand their brand?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll give you a resource if you want to look at it. It's a friend of mine. His name is Todd Hartley, and you should all look him up. Todd is a video guy. He's out of Scottsdale, Arizona. He and his wife are friends of ours, and he does all the video training for Tony Robbins' Business Mastery. And he does video for some of the biggest brands in the world, Coke and Ford and all these big groups. And Tony found him and said, I want you to come teach people how important video is. Well, it's simply this. It's the thing that we've always heard, that old idiom, right? It's a picture's worth 1,000 words. I could tell you all about a beautiful mansion, or I could just show you a picture of it. You go, oh, wow, look at that. You see it, right? You and I could write out, we could transcribe the discussion that we've had, and people could read it, could be black and white, but now they get to hear it. They get to see tone. They get to see, visuals. They get to see people moving their hands and talking, and it creates a whole different thing. In fact, sometimes if I'm going back and forth, I'm doing a negotiation right now with a group, and the president and I were going back and forth, and I kind of felt like he thought that maybe I was mad or I was getting upset about something. And I just called him and I said, I just want you to hear my tone of voice. I'm not mad at all, but I can see where you might think that based on the text. And, because we were negotiating, right? And I wanted him to hear that I was happy and that I wasn't mad and I was cool with everything. And it completely changed the outcome of the negotiation. It completely changed the trajectory of the negotiation, because now he didn't think I was contentious anymore. He thought that I was just trying to work the deal out, and it completely changed how it worked. So it's very important for us to view, to see, to hear, and not just to read.
So once people like you, respect you, and trust you and know you, that's when their minds are made up and they want to invest in you because you are your brand. And your brand is your promise?
Yeah, absolutely. There's an old saying called bet on the jockey. And you might not always bet on the horse, you might bet on the jockey. And that's why some entrepreneurs, they get a big hit. They start a company and they sell it and they make a bunch of money, and maybe their friends and family got rich. Maybe they had no investors, but their friends and family got rich. Now, the next time they go to investors and they go, hey, I built this company, I started from scratch. My family gave me a couple $100,000 and I sold it for 8 million. Well, now those investors go, this guy or this lady, they may know what they're doing. I'll take a flyer on you. So they're betting on the jockey. And so that's what you want to do. You want to show people that you can ride any horse. And you look at Elon Musk. If Elon Musk, he doesn't need the money, but if he walked into a hedge fund and said, hey, give me $500 million, I'm going to start a company, those guys would scramble for their checkbooks, wouldn't they? Because he did it with PayPal. That's where he made his first, PayPal. And then he went into electric cars, and now he's going into space, and who knows what else he's going to do. So here he takes 3 separate industries. Nobody's betting on the industry. They're betting on the jockey. They're betting on Elon Musk, and we can all be little Elon Musks. If we can prove ourselves, it makes it a lot easier to raise that money.
Absolutely. He has a phenomenal space company that has launch capability.
Yeah,
and that's
absolutely.
very, very huge. And he's trying to basically move forward with taking people to the moon in regards to creating a whole nother civilization on the moon.
Yeah. I'm not signing up for that deal, but somebody else can if they want to. I like it down here on Earth.
Absolutely, absolutely. Chris, uh, this has been phenomenal, and I really appreciate you conveying value to my audience.
Sure. I love it.
Can you explain to the audience what is the best advice that you have ever received?
You know, I get asked this question a lot, and I'll tell you, it's the same answer all the time. And I'll even tell you the story. It's a weird story. So I'm at a conference. I'm like 23 years old, and it was like a break or something. And I'm standing in the back, and there's like 200 people milling around. They're getting their coffee, whatever. And I'm just kind of standing there. I didn't know anybody. And I'm just kind of at this conference. And I kind of turn around a little bit, and there were two women. I found out later it was a mother and her daughter. They were like 50 and 30. And when I looked at them, the 30-year-old, the daughter went like this. Her eyes just popped and her mouth dropped open. She looked at me, and I was like, this is weird. And her mother says, her mother looks at her, looks at me, looks at her and says, is that him? And she just nodded her head with her eyes bugged out. And she's like, well, tell him then. And I'm just like, this is the weirdest thing ever. So the mother says, listen, I'll tell you the story. Last night, in the middle of the night, we're in a room, we got two queen beds, and my daughter wakes up and she said, I just had the most vivid dream ever. And her mom said, well, what was the dream? And she said, I saw a man I've never seen before, and I'm supposed to tell him something. And apparently I was the guy that appeared in this woman's dream. And her mom says, so tell him. And she looks at me and she says, you're supposed to be a voice, not an echo. And
Powerful.
I never got their names. I don't know who they are. I've never seen them again. I didn't stay in touch. But this was in like 1989. So for 30 something years, I have used that as my credo. Be a voice, not an echo. I don't just read other people's books and then spit that back to other people and pretend that it's mine. I like to rethink things. Now, I also understand, the Bible says in the book of Ecclesiastes, of the writing of books, there is no end, and there's nothing new under the sun and those kinds of things, but there might be a new angle. And so I always like to not just, say what somebody else is saying. I like to think it through and come to my own conclusions. My friend Mark Sanborn, he always says, the first key to being a thought leader is you have to think. If you can't be a thought leader if you're just regurgitating something that somebody else said.
That's right.
That guy's the thought leader. You're the thought repeater. If you want to be a thought leader, you have to come up with your own thoughts. And so I've actually looked that up. Apparently, it was a saying from Albert Einstein. Be a voice, not an echo. But then again, I think a lot of quotes get attributed to Albert Einstein. I don't know if he really said it or not, but be a voice, not an echo. And that's always been the best piece of advice, particularly as a speaker. I want to be someone who says something new and not just regurgitating something that somebody else said.
Absolutely. You have to be, a leader. In order to attract great leaders, you must make the decision that you want to become a great leader.
Absolutely. For sure.
Chris, I wrote down some powerful words, 10 being the highest and 1 being the lowest. So you can rate them in your own powerful way. Are you ready?
Yep.
Accountability.
Well, you're going to make it difficult. I don't really believe in accountability, and I'll tell you why. That's a caveat, because you can have an accountability partner who you aren't accountable to unless you are accountable to yourself. So accountability to yourself, 10. And if you're accountable to yourself, then you really don't need somebody else to hold you accountable.
Perseverance.
10. Oftentimes, it's just the person who sticks it out. Think about all the people that quit before it would have happened for them.
Intellectual property.
I think an 8. I think you have to have it. You have to protect it for sure. But there's other people that for example, people that do disc profiles. Well, that's not their intellectual property, but they use somebody else's intellectual property and they lease it or buy it or rent it, and they use it to create income or whatever.
Family.
10. The family is the smallest social construct, but it's the most important social construct. It's where we learn to love. It's where we learn to forgive. It's where we learn our values. It's where we're supposed to pass along our values. And, we live in a broken world, and there's a lot of broken families, and it's always sad because the power of the family is so important.
Power.
Power. That's an interesting one. I would say that power, simply the way most people think of the word power, I would say a 2, because I think that service is real power. And if you serve people, you actually have more power than if you seek power.
Purpose.
Purpose, I'd say, is a 9 or a 10. I mean, you have to know where you're going. It's what changed my life. I was a kid who was lost and drifting, and I call people tumbleweed people. Think of an old Western, right? And the town is completely, and there's that tumbleweed, and then the wind blows and it goes this way, and then the wind blows and it comes back this way. We want to know where we're going, and we need to be disciplined to get there.
Love.
Love, I would say, if properly defined, is a 10. Love is not like. I think sometimes we confuse love with like. Oh, I love chocolate cake. Well, what does that mean? It means you like chocolate cake. A lot of people say they love people, but as soon as they don't like them, they don't treat them well anymore. So I think love is sacrificial. It's treating people the way they deserve to be treated because they're human beings.
Culture.
Coaching?
Culture.
What is it? Oh, culture. Culture. Particularly for companies, I think that culture is very important. The culture is the establishment of the accepted norms of a business. Some cultures, they're dynamic and they're competitive, and everybody's always fighting and clawing and scratching, and that's how they get places. That's how they forge ahead. That's how they find new inventions and things like that. Other cultures, very loving and kind and supportive. And I think it's just important because a culture, when new people come into your group, the culture is easily seen, and you need to protect it so that person fits your culture rather than your culture being pulled into somebody else's ideas for your group.
Branding.
Branding is important, and I would say it goes right up there with positioning that we talked about earlier. Branding is it's sort of the way that people know you. I actually just read a great book called The Visual Hammer, and it's about how to use visuals to demonstrate your brand to the world. It was a really interesting book.
Brainstorming.
Brainstorming is good. You need to have, if it's the right people. You don't want to brainstorm with dumb people or people who've never done anything. You want to brainstorm with the right people who can punch holes in your business. In fact, I had a call with somebody the other day, I don't know, 2-3 weeks ago now, and I gave him the idea and I said, punch holes in my idea. And he looked at it, and he was a very successful guy, lives in like a 15,000 square foot mansion and built a ton of businesses. And he said, man, I wish I could poke a hole in your model, but I don't see any holes in your model. But then there's other times I got, you'll come up with an idea and they'll go, well, here's what you're missing. Oh, yeah, I didn't even think about that. And that happens more often than not. But you want somebody to poke holes in your idea before you actually, if you're selling buckets and you have a hole in your bucket, you want somebody to point out the hole in your bucket before you start selling buckets with holes in them, because then you're not going to sell any buckets. So you want people to poke holes in your business plan and your ideas so that you can make it better.
Health.
Health is number one. I mean, you only get to live once. As soon as your health is gone, it's gone.
Wealth.
I always say that true wealth is not it's not the overachievement in one area. It's not just money. I mean, we all know people who they're worth $1 billion and their family hates them. They're worth $10 million and their kids won't talk to them. And so wealth is more overachievement. It's less overachievement. It's more balanced achievement. I think having your health and some financial independence and those things, that's real wealth. Building
great relationships.
Nothing gets done without relationships. It's a 10. You have to be able to work with other people. A few years ago, I figured out that I don't have a single set of income or source of income that somebody else doesn't also make money.
Value.
Value, we talked a lot about it at the beginning of the podcast. You have to provide value. You have to give value. Relationships have to be mutually beneficial. They have to be win-win. They can't be win-lose. And you have to, then that's about you providing as much value to the other person than they provide you.
Integrity.
Integrity is always number one in my book, The Art of Influence. It's number one in my audio program called Winning with Influence, which has 12 areas. It's number one. It's always number one because integrity breeds trust, and trust is the core of doing business with other people. If you don't trust them, you don't do business anymore.
President Biden.
I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of the results. You know, it's I'm a results guy. I mean, I typically am a conservative. I typically vote Republican. But you know what? If somebody showed up and they were neither Republican or Democrat and they ran, you know, as the XYZ party and they believed in, you know, fiscal responsibility and all those kinds of things, I would vote for that person. I vote for results. So I don't like the results of what I've seen so far. But you know, if he produced different results, I'd support him.
Respect.
I think respect, especially coming off of the last question, you know, you can disagree with someone and still respect them. And in fact, I think you have to. I talk a lot about politics and I get into a lot of debates with political friends and things like that. But I always tell them this is what I say to everybody. I will argue with you and I'll argue and I'll make you defend yourself and we'll go toe to toe and head to head. But at the end, I'll buy you dinner because I like you.
Land trust.
Land trust. I don't know much about them. I'm the wrong guy to ask.
All righty. All right, that was good. That was real good, Chris.
Thanks. You threw me with the political one. People don't normally ask me my political beliefs. And here's the problem. When you talk about politics in this day and age, half the people hate you, right? It doesn't matter who you pick. The other half hates you. And that's one of the real sad things about America is that we've become increasingly polarized.
Right, absolutely. And I know earlier during the show, you was talking about trust. And, you know, the wealthy people, that's what, you know, the DuPonts and the Bilderbergs, they actually created a dynasty trust.
Yep.
Where they actually, you know, basically created a family office where they keep the money in the family. Chris, can you explain to the audience, what do you like to do for fun?
I like to read. I like to travel. My wife and I like to travel and go to new restaurants and things like that. I used to play a lot of poker. I played a lot of poker for about 8 years. I used to travel around the world and I played in some poker games all around the world. I find poker really fascinating. It's not just a card game. There's strategy, there's math, there's personality, there's bluffing, there's all sorts of things. I think poker is a great analogy for life. So I like to, if I play a game, I like to play poker. I like to learn new things. I find people fascinating. I find their stories fascinating. Everybody has really interesting stories, and everybody has a past. Everybody has a future, and I love to hear stories about what people have done.
Absolutely. I love a great story as well. So facts tell, but stories always sell.
Yeah, absolutely. I told somebody that just the other day.
Chris, can you explain to the audience exactly where they can find you?
Sure. ChrisWidener.com. Really simple. They can go there. They can hit the store button. That'll take them to all the books and audio programs. If they're looking for coaching, they can send me an email, chris@chriswidener.com. Just all sorts of ways to get a hold of me. Pretty easy.
Chris, this has been a phenomenal dialogue. And, you know, you have a wealth full of wisdom. Do you have any last pearls of audience do you have any last pearls of wisdom for the audience?
Yeah, I'll share something that Jim Rohn and I wrote in the book 12 Pillars, and that is, you cannot determine how long you live, but you can determine how well you live. And so some of us get 10 years, some of us get 50 years. My dad had 41 years. My older brother is now 69. You know, some people live to 100. You don't know how long you're going to live, but you can determine how well you live. And so no matter how long you get in this world, do your best, be of value, love other people, make a difference, and leave it better than when you showed up.
Chris, I'd like to thank you once again for taking time out of your busy schedule to educate me and the audience worldwide about your phenomenal book, The Art of Influence, and about wealth building principles. I gladly appreciate it. You are a gift from God.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on and sharing me with your audience.
I appreciate you and everything that you do. To everyone that's listening and watching right now, I highly recommend getting involved with the phenomenal Chris Widener. You hear the passion that came through his voice on my show today. He broke down layman's terms about the power of just being yourself and being authentic as an entrepreneur, and just get out there and just do it. Knowledge is not power. The implementation of knowledge, that's what makes it become powerful. So go to Chris's website, chriswidener.com. That's Chris, C-H-R-I-S, Widener, W-I-D-E-N-E-R.com. Go to his website. He has incredible, phenomenal content that could take your mindset and your business to a whole nother level. But remember, you have to implement what you learn. So to everyone that's listening and watching right now, remember that the strongest asset that each and every one of you have is your brain, and what you think about and what you take action on, that will become your reality, and your mentality creates your reality. May God bless each and every one of you, and bye for now. Thank you, Chris. I really appreciate you conveying value to my audience.
Thank you again.
Have a pleasant day, everyone. And don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. And bye for now.